Good afternoon, everybody, and thank you for joining us for our Integrated Corridor Management Peer Exchange Workshop. I'm Julie Malachek, and I will be the host for today's workshop. So if there are technical issues, I will be helping you handle those. We have a few minor things to just give you pointers for our event today. Slide. Oop, I went too far. Basic rules of engagements. All attendees are going to be muted throughout the presentations. If you'd like to ask a question, you have a couple options. You can raise your hand if you are online or logged into the online meeting. There should be a hand icon that you can click on to raise your hand. It'll either be next to your name or it's going to be in that lower corner by the Q&A panel, but there will be a hand icon to click on. This will raise your hand and you will be addressed by me. When it's your turn to speak, I will unmute you and you will have a chance to answer or ask a question or make any comments. When you're finished, we just ask that you lower your hand so we know that you are complete with what you need. If you are dialing in only and you don't have access to the online meeting, you will use *3 to raise your hand. And again, when you're finished, you use *3 to lower your hand. The other option is you can submit a question, a written question in our Q&A box. It should be on the bottom right-hand part of your screen. If you click on that, it should open it. You can type in a question, and I will be monitoring those to address them to our speakers or answering them if they're technical, WebEx technical in nature. We've got our basic agenda listed for our session 1. Today we'll have presentations from Tennessee DOT, Missouri DOT, KC Scout, and Arizona DOT. So without further ado, Neil, would you like to get us started?
Yeah, thanks, Julie. So good afternoon. I'm Neil Fobian. I'm the project lead for the Des Moines ICM at the Iowa DOT. I want to thank everyone for taking time out of your busy schedules today to join us and participate in session 1 of our 3-day workshop. And hopefully you'll be able to attend session 2 later this week, and then our follow-up discussion planned for next week in session 3. The purpose of our workshop today is to learn more about ICM, how and where it's been used, and to gather a little bit of national perspective on ICM and other regions of the country. We'll hear about some innovations and lessons learned from our peers to help, and this information will help the Iowa DOT and our partner agencies further concept ICM for our urban areas. To help with this national perspective, we gathered a great list of presenters from our peers in Arizona, Minnesota, Missouri, and Tennessee. So next I want to hand it over to John Mark with HDR, and he's going to have a few additional opening remarks and introduce our guest speakers for us. John, go ahead.
Thanks, Neil. I just want to thank everybody for joining for this virtual peer exchange event. It's been a while in the making. We have been working on the Des Moines Integrated Corridor Management Project since late 2018. And as part of that, we recognize that there is a large shift in how the DOT and other transportation providers and stakeholders interact with transportation when we move to a more managed transportation system. And so in growing, all of us growing to understand that a little bit better, we sought to work with other states and their local partners to pull together a sharing of ideas. And so we've broken this up into 3 sessions. The first session today will be focused on 3 different state perspectives, looking at integrated corridor management and similar transportation systems management and operations philosophies and their projects. We'll be handling each of these as a presentation and a Q&A, and so we'd ask you to use the Q&A panel to make sure that we get the right questions asked of our speakers. And then on Thursday, June 3rd, we will be kind of using a similar format, and we'll be going through 3 additional presentations. One additional state, Iowa's presentation on the Des Moines ICM that Neil and I will lead, and then a presentation on, evolution of the integrated corridor management concept led by Les Jacobson of WSP. What we're really excited about is a week from Thursday in the afternoon, June 10th, we'll have a time for a panel discussion and then also some small group breakout sessions where we'll be getting your guys' feedback on what you hear at these sessions and, what really stands out to you as key takeaways so that all of these areas that are participating can grow a little bit in integrated corridor management. I also just want to thank our partner in Federal Highway Administration. They have provided some resources that we shared with you ahead of the meeting, and we do encourage you to take a look at those if you hadn't had a chance yet. They will help with some of that kind of really deep background information on what integrated corridor management is. I'd also like to say that we'll be making sure that these recordings are kept available so that everybody will have a chance to go back and look at these presentations again. And all the time that people spend in this sharing of information is at your guys' hands in the future as you're looking at integrated corridor management across other parts of Iowa or for further depth in Des Moines. With that, I will turn it over to our first speaker and let him start to get set up. Lee Smith is presenting today on behalf of the Tennessee DOT. He'll be talking about the Interstate 24 Smart Corridor. And Lee, with that, you can go ahead and share your screen. We will get into presentation one.
All right. Is everything showing up okay, John?
We are seeing that.
Great.
That's
Great.
good.
Well, Julie, John, Folks from Iowa DOT, thanks for the invite. My name is Lee Smith. I'm with Tennessee DOT in the headquarters Traffic Operations Division. My boss, my esteemed colleague, mentor and life coach, Brad Freeze, couldn't join us today. He had a last minute conflict that came up, so you guys are stuck with me. So, but I've been with TDOT about 2.5 years. Before that, I was with Florida DOT about 5 or 6 years, and then I was a city traffic engineer in the Panhandle of Florida before that. So that's kind of my background, and I've been involved in TSMO and freeway management, arterial management now, I guess, for close to 15 years and 10 years of consulting, doing general civil before that. So that's kind of my background. So I'll try my best not to read slides to you guys. I'm not sure, Julie, if you wanted folks to ask questions, I guess, in the Q&A. But if anybody wanted to interrupt me, I'd be happy to answer questions as we go. So, does that sound good, John?
Sounds great. Go ahead and start with your presentation, and yeah, we'll take questions as they come up if people raise their hands.
All right. Let's see if this is it advancing okay?
Yep, the slide advanced.
All right, great. Okay, so sort of a long agenda. Try to breeze through some elements and maybe spend some more time on others. I think that it's always important to look at your mission and goals and kind of steer where, how, and how you're going to operate the technology that you deploy. But I'm going to run through. We're in the middle of deploying our ICM in Nashville, Tennessee. So I'll have some elements we've got some experience with, some that we are still in planning and deployment phases, but I can definitely share what we're doing to stand up this ICM. And some innovative things at the end there about some artificial intelligence supported decision support system. So this is kind of our agenda. And I'll go ahead and get started here. So our TDOT's mission about a safe and reliable transportation system. That's pretty common among DOTs, but I think we want to always focus on that and keep that as our guiding principle. The I-24 Smart Corridor mission is safety and reliability of all travel. So we want to bring in all modes, and the first of those two modes being, well, not really modes, but freeway and arterial management. Those are the two really that are the foundation of the rest. And then 4 of our goals, and important to point out that our goal is to improve travel time reliability. not necessarily the duration of your trip or anything, that kind of thing. Increase mobility of all modes, like I said, starting with arterial and freeway management, and then reduce the concentration of crashes and also develop agency coordination. There are two really important things here about the I-24 Smart Corridor. One is that it's one of the most or the most congested corridor in the state of Tennessee, and it also has one of the higher incidents of traffic incidents, crashes, and the severity of crashes. So that's our challenge for this project. And so just looking at purpose and need, and I don't know how these numbers compare nationwide, but to us, they're they're high, and we wanted to address this. So this is kind of a picture of where we are as well. Nashville, Tennessee, running kind of southeast to some of our bedroom communities and suburbs, a town called Laverne, Tennessee, Smyrna, Tennessee, and Murfreesboro, Tennessee. Those are the four agencies teamed with TDOT, Metro, Davidson County, Nashville, City of Nashville, and then Laverne, Smyrna, and Murfreesboro. They're the ones I'll be referring to as we go through here. So the incidents of crashes, property damage, these are the numbers we're trying to improve upon. So then looking at reliability, looking at the TTI index, those are again trying to drive those down on both the interstate and the arterial. One, I guess, to note also that State Route 1, call it Murfreesboro Road, it's in some sections at capacity, other sections there's maybe some room, but definitely active management will improve that for sure. So our solution to these two problems is a smart corridor, integrated corridor management. And for us, that includes just improving situational awareness, just the basic of what we do freeway management wise every day, using our cameras, our radar sensors, probe data, DSRC, we have that as an element of this project as well. Then public communication, just sharing the information with the public, and then going into improving our operations. These are the strategies we're looking to deploy, at least in phases here. I'll talk more about that later. And then improving just overall management of the corridor, just building the foundation for decision support and building this foundation of interagency coordination. That'll be a big piece of what we'll talk about. So just incident management, that tool, that foundational traditional tool, and then traffic management being new to Tennessee as far as using these kind of strategies. And like I said, the first list there will go into a couple of different horizons of how we're using these different strategies. And then overall integrated corridor management. So that's kind of the concept. And then we'll get into some of our short-term deployments. So this project actually is phased, luckily, I think, because we're introducing brand new strategies to Tennessee. Variable speed limits, active lane management, ramp metering, and active arterial management, a coordination with local agencies. We haven't, Tennessee does not own or operate signals, so we have to work with our local agencies. They're responsible for operations and maintenance. So the DOT, state DOT being involved in traffic signal operations and maintenance is a brand new thing. So we're kind of plowing some new ground on a lot of this. Brad likes to call it the Cambrian explosion. We're taking, huge leaps forward in how we manage traffic in Tennessee with this project. So just we'll run through these pretty quickly. We have three phases to the project. The first one is kind of a foundational phase. We're putting all new traffic signal controllers in 120 signals along the corridor. We're putting in additional roadside DMS. We're putting in some simple things like ramp extensions and emergency pull-offs. Those are low-tech solutions, but they can have an effect for sure. So that's the first phase. This is just a kind of a count of the number of these devices on the corridor. DSRC along there. Actually, the rest of the devices, I don't need to read that to you. So get into some of the operational improvements. So this infrastructure we're going to use to do signal timing optimization, update our TMC procedures, because this affects both the arterial procedures and our freeway procedures, obviously. Improve our operational coordination, and then putting in some really good active arterial management kind of type of tools. We're using Bluetooth. We're have the Econolite product as our traffic signal controller, and then so that puts Centrax as the platform for that. So we're using ATSPMs, measures of effectiveness, Bluetooth, these things to kind of tell that story, and also to give the traffic engineers along the corridor some really good tools to improve day-to-day operations, as well as when we have to do incident diversion. So then going into intermediate deployments, just going to run through this pretty quickly. This second phase is the one that's going to be most visible, and we're in the middle of deploying this phase. We are over the road lane control gantries is a huge difference. That's what this public will really see to start with. So we're really gearing up and preparing for that phase. And I'll look at the schedule here in a minute. So additional dynamic message signs, the communication, we're adding some communication improvements as well. So going through here, again, the numbers of the various devices, DMS, we're going to put in stop bar control with video detection using the MyoVision product at all the intersections. And again, the additional overlane DMS, the active lane management. Then some operation improvements with that. I mean, this is only 3 bullets, but it's huge. Interstate incident management response plans. So that's, there are crashes every day on I-24 that already divert traffic to the parallel corridor, parallel arterial, but we're going to try to manage that traffic. And then the flush plans, utilizing the variable speed limits and the active lane management procedures. And then going into the long-term deployments, this is phase 3. We're going to, we'd be deploying ramp metering. We've just completed a study that has selected the algorithm we plan to use there. Again, we're going to put in arterial CCTVs. That's relatively new. There's only a few agencies that have many of those. So we're going to have basically camera coverage along the arterial corridor. And then some operational improvements. I'll talk a little bit about the decision support system. One of the pieces you might see that's missing here is transit. We will be in our active arterial management piece of this. There is a transit signal priority project along the north or west end of the corridor that we'll be incorporating and be able to accommodate. But we really want to see more on the transit TDM type strategies. The honest truth is we just need to get our basics down. We need to crawl, walk, run. So the managing the arterial with the traffic signal operations and improve O&M, as well as the active lane management, variable speed limits, those are things we have to get down. And then we'll definitely have vision in our ConOps and in all of our planning documents to incorporate and add other additional modes. So going through here, here's our schedule, our overall schedule. So we started this project, phase 1, back in 2018. We've just at the very end of deploying, actually, the phase 1, as often happens, has been extended a little bit. We're right there at the very end of just validating the DSRC as one of the last elements that we're doing. So phase 2, the construction is ongoing. We're riding, I guess, right in here, I guess, for the and that one again has been extended as well, as you guys all can appreciate. Construction contracts often do. So this is kind of where we are on the schedule. But the more important thing we're really focusing on right now is the O&M schedule. So we are developing all of our standard operating procedures for both the arterial and the freeway, looking at the ITS network configuration, updating all of our ConOps documents. We're really focusing in on getting all of the O&M pieces in place to operate the ICM strategies we're implementing. So this is really a focus of our team right now. We have Arcadis as our consultant helping us with that, and several of our staff members are kind of tapped out to really focus in on the O&M development. And now just kind of some things we're doing right now as far as the project status. Active lane management, like I said, that's the first thing that's going to be visible for the project. So we're really focusing on developing the algorithms, the scenarios. We have the Southwest Research Institute, their active ITS software platform. Florida and Texas have it, and I know that there's several other states. I think Compass and other folks in the Northeast. I think Oregon have similar product. We're kind of grafted into the Florida and Texas code base. So Swery is our software developer, and we call it in Tennessee. In Texas they call it Lone Star. Florida they call it SunGuide, and in Tennessee we call it SmartWay Central Software. Is our public-facing website, and our is branded SmartWay. So my point is that we're developing the data algorithms needed in order to stand up a active lane management module be operated by the TMC. And then the development of incident management plans, that's something that we're working with all the local agencies. We have, like I mentioned, 4 traffic signal agencies that are part of the team. And so we also call it, our plan for incremental operations. That just kind of speaks to deploying and preparing O&M for the tools as we deploy them. So when they become available, we can start to use them. And so just some kind of details there. One of the main challenges is, developing this, what level of O&M, what level of service is needed in order to operate an ICM, effectively. And so we're assessing where our 4 local agency partners, where they currently are on that continuum, and then we're calling it an additional layer of support. So agency A is really strong in O&M, agency B maybe really strong in like network. Their ITS network is really well maintained and well operated. So we're trying to find where those gaps are so we can fill those gaps. Then we're doing some ICM peer exchanges too, like this one today. We're actually through the T2 funding through Federal Highway, we've done one virtual because of COVID with Washington DOT. They've had one of the longest standing active traffic management, active lane management systems in place there in the Seattle area. They were also going to go down to Florida. Actually, we may actually get a chance to go. That's something that's coming up. So we got those 2 things in the works. And just like you guys are doing today, just to learn from other states, whether they've been the pros, cons, lessons learned, all of that. So an ongoing stakeholder engagement. We have monthly, we call it technical advice. That's a large stakeholder group, including law enforcement and transit and our MPO partners, just a very large group. And we have been also talking to our local agencies that maintain signals on kind of an individual basis. The plan is just to get kind of shoulder to shoulder with them so that when we develop these timing plans, it's not done in a vacuum. It's not DOT going off in a room and developing timing plans that they don't, even agree with or whatever. So that's really important to build that foundation. And kind of going into, kind of digging into the ICM needs and why we're spending so much effort on the managing the operation. So really, we're nearly doubling the number of devices in our system in Nashville. Like I mentioned, introducing new technologies, and this is a whole new thing for local agencies. In order to really be able to do the active lane management, the ICM, the variable speed limits, and also diverting traffic off from I-24 to the parallel arterial. So, and we've developed this kind of concept, and we started looking at the capabilities of the local agencies and what they maintenance agreement that they use. Some states have different, in Virginia, they own all the traffic signals. Different models are out there. But Tennessee, where we are with it right now, we own and operate signals. We have to develop some way to kind of bring a system together that can be maintained and operated at a high level. So when we looked at the we could really have dug into what the O&M program is for the local agencies, and arrived at, okay, we're not going to fund O&M directly for now. We're going to do through a consultant contract, through a maintenance contract, provide an additional layer of support. And in addition to that, our TMC operation is very strong, does a very good job, but they don't have the skill set currently for ICM, for active lane management. These things are new to them as well. So we identified the need for, we're calling it an ICM coordinator. And that's going to be kind of the role that Arcadis has as we work together with them to develop the SOGs and the training needs. And then our plan is for that to kind of evolve into, now we have staff in the TMC that's, operating the active lane management and the variable speed limits, working with the local agencies. And that could be that individual sitting in the TMC, or could be some version of staff support in each of the local agency TOCs. So specific to this corridor, and really dialing into those elements. That's something that's kind of a new thing for us, and we think it's going to be the best way to take these first steps with the local agencies. We're not coming down. We want to make sure that the responsibilities and roles are clear, but we also want to make sure that they feel like that we're partnering together. So again, kind of looking at the O&M needs, we want to be a extension of their staff. Like I said, using the initial tools, that's really important that we get these, the Bluetooth, the DSRC, the ATSPMs, everything that a traffic engineer can utilize to better operate their system. We want to train them on that and get the right version, because some traffic engineers on the corridor, they're wearing 5 hats, as is often the case. So they don't have time to dig into it, but maybe we can develop, here's a couple of reports that can be, developed really quickly. You come in the morning, hit this button, and you get a picture of what your corridor is doing. So those are the kind of things we want to do to start with. It really is trying to be trying to go from the ground up. And then, looking at expectations, like I said, identifying, looking at the key performance indicators, what's the response time that's needed in order for an ICM to really function. If you're going to divert traffic from the interstate to a parallel arterial, you can't have half the detection down, so you have to evaluate that. What is that line? What is that metric we need to be looking at? And then we can fill that gap. Basically, if the local agency can't repair, some detection or whatever in a certain period of time, then we're going to come in there and assist them with that. And then, like I mentioned before, this is a paradigm shift for Tennessee. Ironically, we're actually also working on, in a whole other program, providing some assistance to our smaller rural agencies. That's another little piece. I mentioned that it's the acronym TSM&M, Traffic Signal Modernization and Maintenance. That's just a new thing what we've been doing, kind of addressing the need in a different way, offering assistance to local agencies of less than 2,500 people population. So just kind of speaks to that paradigm shift for Tennessee. Now we've developed, in phase 3, as that starts up, we've done a study of the ramp meter algorithms that are out there. Our consultant for the phase 3 design has done a great job. They've looked at multiple different algorithms. The one we landed on was the helper algorithm that's used in Denver, Colorado. It's more traffic responsive with central control. Meters are pulled every 20 seconds to collect detector and metering data. So we feel like that's a good kind of middle ground, and a good system for us, I guess, as far as the needs. And then kind of the innovation that we were lucky enough to be selected for an ATCMTD grant last year. So this is a piece of the project that we have in our ConOps to have vision for, but we don't have that. We didn't have it funded and planned yet, but we got this grant. Now we can move forward with that. So it's created a great opportunity to take the decision support system model that was deployed in San Diego and Dallas, and those are based on microsimulation. Our vision is to develop a decision support system that's based on AI, where the model learns through some microsim to learn the basics, and then through operator input to learn what response plans worked and which ones didn't, and this sort of thing. So really excited about this end of the project. Kind of just the way we envision the ICM or the DSS to work for us. These multiple inputs, weather, 511, all of the stakeholders really have an input into a data bus and the model in order to provide a response plan to the TMC operator that has this intelligence behind it. The first thing we had to do in this grant project is to define DSS, because that's different folks have different definitions of that. Our active ITS SmartWay CS platform that Swery developed, they would call that part of that DSS because it presents a response plan to the operator with this many DMS that it will be part of that response plan, this message going to 511, and that's a form of DSS. We're talking about obviously a much higher level of that's going to be supported by AI. And in kind of an intermediate step, and really the important step for us is developing the rules-based active lane management and VSL. So those have to stand on their own, and then you bring in as kind of an outer shell this AI supported DSS that's going to just make all those operate that much better. So then again, it's just because of the grant and because it's good practice, we're doing an evaluation process to look at how this tool is going to function. So we've just actually parallel to the active lane management and the VSL tools being available, this grant was awarded. So we're kind of running in parallel, which is good, but also the definition of terms and the two projects, making sure the roles and responsibilities are clear between the two teams. So just kind of wrapping up here. So now this really should be the first slide because the outreach to the public is huge for this. But we have a lot to do before we're ready to even talk to the public, I guess, in some way. We've been updating them as we go along. We have a really good project video on our website, but this is kind of like a lot of other things in this project. This is a whole other level that we're going to. So working closely with our we call it in Tennessee, we call it the Community Relations Division, so CRD, working with them closely on when we have these milestones to interact with the public. We're considering all kinds of things and would love to hear input on this. Going to the Lions Club, and we're actually modifying our driver's manual to educate the public about what the X's and arrows actually mean. We're actually considering we have an HOV lane out there now, and we can dynamically control that. That's a whole other topic actually. One thing we're looking at is the yellow arrow with the merge text on there. That's currently not specifically allowed, I guess, by a shall statement on the MUTCD, but we're considering, getting our game plan together to go and talk to Federal Highway about using that. Some states have done that under experimental. We might look at that, but we feel like that would be more effective than the yellow X. So that's something we're considering. But the point of this really is that the outreach and the education of the public is critical. Tennessee's never seen a sorry, I had a phone call come in. I'll talk about that. Tennessee's never seen a active lane management, over the road gantry like this. So we do have a variable speed limit system in place down in Chattanooga, but it's for fog and not for congestion or for incident management specifically. So that'll be a new thing. So wanted to kind of talk about this a little bit, the challenges that we've had, that we've encountered for deploying ICM, because it's the first time in Tennessee doing this. So, we're deploying, like I mentioned before, multiple new strategies at one kind of, luckily we're in phases. So if we were doing this all at once, I think it'd be, would be a real challenge. But this is having 3 phases has allowed us to kind of, engage in that crawl, walk, run method. So local agency coordination, collaboration, that's just, like I said, that's critical. We're working really hard on that. We have really good buy-in from our local agency partners, but they, very wisely said, okay, well, what do you expect from us? And we want to deliver for you. So we're looking at, our expectations of, how we're going to operate this integrated corridor management system. The concept of active arterial management is new. I mean, we have some really good, one of our strengths in Tennessee is our traffic incident management program, our freeway management, and traffic signal operations by local agencies. We have some agencies that do a great job, but TDOT's never been involved. So, and really, even in the ones that do a great job, the concept of active arterial management, and really kind of mainstreaming that, where you're really being proactive, kind of leaning forward on your traffic signal O&M. That's a new thing, and just kind of digging into what the local agencies expect from us, the funding. And then, like I said, the beginning is going to be in the form of contract labor and, maintenance contracts, but, we'll evaluate over time. Do we need to have the model where we're providing funding, with the ask of, performance measures and that sort of thing. But just really, these are the kind of things we've that are challenges we recognize, and we're working really hard to meet those challenges. But it's a brand new thing. So this is the kind of project that keeps you up at night until we get everything just like we like it. So some next steps, like I mentioned before, really the two biggest things for us, for our O&M program team, is developing the operations for the active lane management and the variable speed limits, and then continuing our local agency or interagency coordination. That speaks to not just the local agency signal operations, but also the law enforcement, our TIM team. We're continuing to gather information from other states, and then we're getting into phase 3. We're just finished the ramp metering study, and then we're digging into the ConOps update and the preliminary plan development. So that's it for me. I think I'm okay on time. John, Julie, you want me to stop sharing and just go on to the next presenter?
We do have a question in our Q&A box from Tim Simedinas. He says, great project. Are more advanced cities reluctant to support spending project funds on signal systems in cities that have not been investing in their own systems?
That's a really good question. That's where the assessment comes in, trying to really, it's been kind of it's taken a while because again, sitting down with them individually, not just in a big meeting with 50 people in there and talking about, what do you do? What are your practices? But there is, that's why I think the additional layer of support kind of is what we think will work for us, because there are agencies that don't invest as much in their O&M program. It's really an interesting range. We have, Metro Nashville, large metro in urban city, and then 3 smaller agencies, and Murfreesboro being the biggest of those smaller ones. That Murfreesboro does a great job. But yeah, you're right. It's a challenge, I guess. I guess let me say this: they've not been reluctant to support it. We all have the same core value. That corridor in Nashville is, the worst in the state. We all want to see fewer incidents, better incident clearance times, and better traffic flow. The mobility and safety, and the concept of travel time reliability. So we all have the same goal. It's just that's where we're digging into the roles, responsibilities, expectations. But they're, I guess we're managing that reluctance if it does exist by providing this additional layer of support. Hope that answers the question.
We have another question in our Q&A box. How has the public perceived improving transportation with technology as opposed to widening of the interstate?
Well, that's something we push hard on all the time. Just the concept of TSMO, transportation system management and operations. The public perception is positive, but I think that they're not going to see. This project we've been talking about it a good bit. It's one of our biggest projects in Tennessee. But when they see the active lane management gantries, when they start to see some of the results, then I think that'll really be the proof is in the pudding, as they say. So it's something that we're working hard on, and we actually have to, change our mindset too from Tennessee DOT, because we've always, and I think that Tennesseans are seeing the need to operate the system more efficiently and not widen. But also, our public relations folks have always, informed the public about these traditional projects. This is a different kind of project to inform the public about, even different than our standard ITS expansion project. So we're having to really think about, what type of outreach do we need? How soon? Because it's not just a DMS that's going up; it's a active lane management, gantry that you have to, really comply with and everything. So I think in general, the public is supportive. I think it's something that's been a shift for Tennessee over the last several years, but there's still, this is another level for sure.
Thank you. Now, just a reminder to our other participants, if you'd like to ask a question, you can utilize our question and answer box. You can open that panel by finding the Q&A at the bottom of your screen and expand that. Or if you'd like to ask a question verbally, just raise your hand. If you're dialing in on the phone, you would use *3 to raise your hand. Otherwise, look for the hand icon to click to raise your hand. And I will call on people as necessary.
And this is John. I just want to remind everybody that, we really want to take advantage of this time. Lee and our other presenters have been gracious enough to have some discussions that are, kind of prepared, but a lot of this opportunity is getting the most out of Q&A. And so we'll plan to stay on this Q&A session for good another 20 minutes if questions are out there. So please use your chat pod, add your questions as they come up.
Lee, it looks like we have another question. It says, how is the relationship with other disciplines, i.e. police, fire, public works, etc.?
I think that's one of the Tennessee's strengths, I think, is we have a really strong traffic incident management program. So I think that's a good advantage for us. I think that this is kind of, but I will say it's also asking that TIM team to advance and to, take steps forward, kind of that whole concept of good to great. So I think we have a good relationship to start with, which is great, but we're asking, different and more things maybe of them, as far as enforcing variable speed limits, for instance. We've worked with them on that, and we're, that's something that's under development, and conversations are ongoing. But I think that the cities are supportive, but it's really, like I mentioned, it's advancing our operations in a lot of ways. So luckily we have good relationships to build on, but there's definitely growth that's going to be needed, that whole crawl, walk, run concept. But in general, I think we have a good foundation for it. We're just going to have to really invest and engage in these new strategies. It's a whole thing about not doing it the old way. I think we do a good job, but there's these strategies are going to help us do much better. I mean, I guess I'll tell a really quick story about the public works end. The traffic, one of our traffic signal engineers along the corridor, we were talking about the active lane management gantries and different things, and about developing the traffic signal timing, and something I hadn't thought about. He's like, he's all very supportive. He said, but when we implement these timing plans for a diversion, and we want to kind of beat our chest and tell the public, hey, look at what we improved the travel time, we improved liability. He's like, but just understand that they've always complained about traffic diverting off I-24 traditionally. This is kind of a general complaint, but when they know we're doing something about it, and it's not, we're managing it, quote unquote, that's also a milestone that we need to recognize and educate the public on, and be ready for those questions, because now they can point more specifically to us. The public likes, obviously if they're sitting in traffic, they have something to complain about. So it's something I hadn't thought about. It speaks to the relationship with the local agencies about what they endure as far as complaints and responses, and then what this is a new way of doing it. We want to leverage those improvements and those strategies. So something I kind of had as an aha kind of a moment, like, well, I wanted to show the benefit. I wanted to show the, the improvements, things like, well, just understand that when we do that, I guess one thing I didn't mention is on phase 3, we also have arterial DMS. So we'll be able to do some trailblazing through the corridor, and that'll also be helpful. But just the understanding that the public is going to be expecting a lot when we start to implement these things.
Our next question is, have the reductions in traffic volumes due to COVID led to more people questioning the need or urgency of these projects?
I haven't heard any specifically. It's been a challenge on doing the after portion of our before and after for the traffic signal timing. We had about 80% of it in place before COVID hit. Now we had to go back and finish the last 20% of the signals, implementing the timing plans and the coordination, and we had to kind of be creative about using some. We purchased the INRIX probe data, but I haven't seen that yet. I think that it'd be interesting to see as we kind of re-engage the public more for this next big milestone. We'll get that kind of pushback. I think that the volumes are back, so I don't think that people are perceiving it as going away. But it was we tracked it every day, and we still do, as far as the volume reductions along our interstates. But I think that we haven't seen people question it, and I think that this corridor is going to always be looked at as something that we need to do what we can to improve it. So.
Our next question is, after I-24, are there other corridors that might be considered for ICM? And is Tennessee DOT developing criteria or feasibility processes to help screen candidate corridors?
This is from Jim Hunt from Federal Highway. Thanks for that softball question, Jim, because I actually had that on my list to make sure to mention, and I hadn't mentioned it. So yes, we have some version of ICM. That's where, like you said, the feasibility process comes in. Memphis, Tennessee is in need. We're actually ironically doing a seat of the pants version of ICM right now because of I don't know if y'all have heard about the bridge closure, the crack in the bridge on the I-40 bridge across the Mississippi River. So we're meeting actually this afternoon every day on that, and we're working with the local agencies really closely on diverting traffic and on motorist information and all those things. So there's definitely a need in Memphis, and we feel like that in other urban areas, Chattanooga, Knoxville as well. But we have our base planning documents, our CONOPS and our SEER that we would use to apply that lens to the needs of other corridors. But we haven't developed, I guess, a feasibility process quite yet, but we certainly see the need, and also see the need that it may not be the same version. It may not be these 5 or 6 strategies, maybe a different combination. And I think that this is more of a pure parallel route kind of a project. Although there's a lot of they aren't like directly parallel, but I think that you have a different version if you have a grid pattern of streets in the downtown area, which would be likely what Memphis would need. So there's different versions, obviously, as you guys all know, and we would want to make it based on the purpose and need, and look at what would fit a specific area.
Okay, we're still open for questions. As a reminder, you can utilize the chat box, or you can raise your hand. Sorry, the Q&A panel, not the chat panel.
Actually, if you leave me alone too long, I'll start singing.
I mean, that would be entertaining.
COVID has introduced a whole new thing. I've been doing that at the end of meetings a lot because just to keep morale up, and now it's gotten out of hand. So I advise
that.
Yeah, you don't want that. Trust me. Clear the room.
Well, looks like we do have another question, so somebody must not want you to sing. Do you envision much use of the DSRC?
That's a great question, Jim. So this corridor is one of the ones, and one of the projects in Tennessee where we've really went all in. 150 RSUs, We're deploying 19 or 20 of them on the interstate and the rest on the arterials. And to be honest, so we're and like I also mentioned in the construction phase, we're at the very end of the first phase, and we're validating the DSRC. And that's also fairly unique, I think, in the country, as far as not deploying it with our own forces and kind of with more control. We put this in a construction project, which has, low bid contractor. It has some risks there, and we're experiencing some of those bumps and bruises. And I can talk about that, at more as well. But as far as using the DSRC, we do have vision, to use it on our the fleet side initially. Obviously, the penetration is something we have to work with, as far as how many vehicles have the OBUs. So there's a couple options there. One is we happen to use the Spectra, the TrafficCast Spectra unit, which is a combination Bluetooth and a Denso RSU. So there is an option of maybe looking at a corridor specific app maybe, and that's something we're in the middle of deciding about, because TDOT doesn't typically or currently endorse a specific vendor or the whole distracted driving piece, which those are evolving conversations, but we're looking for ways to utilize it to start with. I guess maybe it's the answer to the question. And I believe very strongly in DSRC. If that red light violation warning application and works and saves one life, it's worth all the investment in my mind. So we're also obviously dealing with the FCC and all that, and our approach has been, continue on until they tell us not to, and look for the transition plan that will have to be implemented. But fleet is our first kind of, we can control the vehicles. We have control who puts them in, so we can realize some benefit there. And then looking for ways to get penetration on the arterial side. So that's kind of our approach to it. We recognize there's not, the penetration is not great to start with, so there may be some limited use, but those are the two things we're trying to get on the ground first.
Okay, our next question is, has funding been a constraint during the project process, capital funding or operational funding?
That's a good question too, John. So far, I mean, our leadership has been very supportive of this project, from the beginning. We've been, so the capital funding, I don't think it's a federally funded project. So our federal highway partners have been involved from the beginning as well. So the capital funding, I think, has been, not been a constraint. The operational funding is where I think we're going to be finding, I don't think we're going to have a constraint there funding wise, but we have to kind of develop and present the need, and make sure that we have that well articulated, because it is something different for Tennessee. But historically, funding for operations has always been something that's a challenge. I think in my time in ITS and TSMO, that's oftentimes is an issue. But right now, I think we've been really well supported by our leadership, and we're really in the first stages of that conversation about O&M. And initially, we've been well supported, but we have to really work hard to quantify and identify exactly what we're doing with those funds. And then if we get down the road to where we're going to be directly funding local agencies, that's going to be a different animal. And from my experience as a traffic engineer, and I'm not sure how this will play out in Tennessee, but it was great to get the funding for traffic signal maintenance, but it didn't always go to my specific, budget. It went to the general fund. So that's something we have to try to traverse that as well. But funding has been good. We were really fortunate that we have good support from our leadership. So.
Thank you. We have another question from John Rainey. I'm sorry if I mispronounced your name. Is automated traffic enforcement a part of this?
No, not at this time. We don't have, my understanding is there's no legislation to support that yet. The best we'll be doing is to enforce the variable speed limits system. And we talked to, like I mentioned, Washington DOT about how they enforced it, what their methods have been. So we're going to be, really digging into that, I guess, as far as how to, what the best way to enforce VSL is. In Washington, they oftentimes would because I guess let me just say this: enforcing VSL is difficult. You know, if you're in a congested traffic flow, then pulling that vehicle over is difficult. What we have done is, what Washington has done is there'll be a portion of that ticket for a traffic incident that would be you also were not in compliance with the variable speed limit. So I'd love to see some automated traffic enforcement, but I don't think it's in the near future for Tennessee.
We still have time for questions if you want to type them into the Q&A panel, or if you want to raise your hand. As a reminder, for those of you that are calling in, you would need to hit *3 to raise your hand, or if you're on the online meeting, there's a hand icon. I believe it will be located somewhere between the participant panelist and the Q&A panel. But there's a hand icon. If you click on that, it will raise your hand and we can call on you and unmute you to ask a question. Looks like Tim Simodinas has his hand raised. Tim, I have unmuted you. You are free to ask your question.
Thank you. This has been a really interesting, great information. I'm curious how your roles and responsibilities are breaking out between central office and your districts or region in this area.
That's a good question. So we have 4 regions in Tennessee, and we call them regions. In Florida, when I was there, we call them districts. It's just terminology. Region 3 is the one in the Nashville area. We have each of our regions kind of are in our 4 urban areas. So working really closely with the Region 3 TMC manager and his folks. This project is being designed and kind of managed out of central office headquarters. The Region 3 TMC and the Region 3 management is bought in, for sure on this project. But we have to be really mindful and intentional about making sure that the TMC manager and his staff is, part of the process, I guess. That's where we don't feel like it's reasonable to necessarily staff up for this. We will be looking at staffing. That's where the ICM coordinator, I think, is the answer we've landed on, because it provides the TMC that expertise in the TMC, and they'll be dedicating staff to this. But this will be, this skill set is not currently existing in the TMC. So I think that helps, because they don't feel like that they're just being, saddled with this, so to speak. We're currently in that stage where we're, looking at their current SOPs, SOGs, looking at, what their current practices are and how they will need to evolve and migrate to an ICM. For instance, our TMC currently manages incidents kind of as a team. So you have somebody that's on DMS, somebody's on dispatch, and those kind of things. This will be an opportunity for them to really look at a corridor-specific approach. And some of our TMCs do that already. Some don't. In Nashville, I think it speaks to the volume of crashes that they deal with every day. But this corridor-specific approach to freeway management will be a difference for them. But having that staff support in the TMC, I think, will be helpful. So I think that it's a challenge. I guess when I was at Florida DOT, I was at the district level, and I always want to make sure that the central office guys are working with us and not putting things in our lap, so to speak. And it's a relationship. It's something we have to work on and have to develop over time. So I feel like we've got a really good team there in the Region 3 TMC to do that. But it's certainly something we have to be mindful of, for sure.
Okay, for our last question. Oh, I'm sorry.
I was just beyond that's good information. It sounds really it's similar. Beyond the TMC, do you have any engineering, especially traffic engineering staff in the districts or region that covers that area?
We do. We call him region traffic engineer, and that individual is also engaged with this project. The piece that's missing is that individual is not typically involved in traffic signal. Maybe just making some tweaks and some changes, maybe, but not fully involved in signal O&M. So that's, we want to make that connection, but that individual currently has not part of their responsibilities. It's why we had to look at the consultant staffing to start with. But I guess that's a big kind of a wait and see thing, I guess, a little bit, because we want the region traffic engineer to be engaged, and that person is, but he's more involved in access management, permitting, that end of it, and then a limited part on the O&M, signal O&M. But I can see that role maybe expanding, and or staffing, because we're entering into some uncharted waters here a little bit, and we see that Tennessee's philosophy on consultant resources is always to have a transition plan to staff it internally. Now that may be a long period of time, or it may never materialize. We always want to have our eye on that, though, and I think that would speak to the region traffic engineer being, that role, maybe being more involved in signal O&M, supporting the local agencies, or maybe managing the additional layer of support. Maybe that's where that management would come out of. And they certainly would be involved in managing that ITS. We'll probably do this with an ITS maintenance contract. We maintain our freeway devices with that type of contract. We envision doing something similar with this. Although we have also looked into some innovative contracting mechanisms, IDIQ or some other vehicles to get that done. But to answer your question, this is a good example of an area that Tennessee is evolving in, and we are looking at what needs to change in our structure to accommodate, especially when we start talking about other ICM deployments.
Thank you. It's remarkably similar to Iowa. I appreciate it.
Okay, it looks like we have time for one more question, and Neil Spiller has his hand raised. Neil, I have unmuted you, and you are free to ask your question.
Thank you. You can hear me now?
Yes.
Okay. First off, a great presentation by Lee. I think it was very good in explaining the integration of their stakeholders, and there's a lot of ATDM going on your main facility. I probably would have liked to have heard a little bit more about what actions take place on the parallel facility. I guess other than maybe changing the traffic signals, and I think you said there's some VMS that might be coming. Those are good and great. But I just wanted to emphasize to everyone listening that it's really the actions that take place on the parallel facilities and even the local roads that take the overburden when there's a problem, a severe problem up on the main line. So to keep that in the back of your mind. But Lee did hit on one of two things that we've hit on before about kind of getting the credit for or marketing the success of an ICM, and that is he talked about the fact that if you're a driver who's stuck in traffic, you may not even know that you were helped. Given that in a normal circumstance, you might have been on that road 2 or 3 or even 4 hours because of that truck overturn or whatever else was happening. But now, because of what's happening behind the scenes, you're only on that road for 45 minutes, or in that backup rather, for 45 minutes to an hour. Now that's still, from their point of view, they're still frustrated. They're still pissed off. They still, have got stuck in traffic, and that's a story they'll tell when they get home. And they're still kind of mad at the world, but they don't really know behind the scenes that they've been saved, twice that experience. The second thing that happens kind of behind the scenes in this business is that we are in the unenviable position of having to wait until there is severe congestion or a severe accident or severe weather or some kind of hugely impacting event. I call it the it's kind of the vampire theory. You have to wait until that extreme event happens before all of this kicks in and we get to look at whether we're actually making some progress or not. I really wish we could do that without having the impacting event take place up front in the first place anyway, but such is the nature of the business. So I congratulate Lee on a very good presentation, and those are a couple things to keep in mind. How you market the success is a very tough thing to do when people don't necessarily, they don't necessarily see what's going on behind the scenes.
That's a great point, Neil. I'd say that one of the things we're working on, you're not still there? Sorry. Oh, here I am. Sorry. One of the things we're working on is that what happens on the arterial, you're exactly right. And building on, what currently happens, like a phone tree, who calls who kind of thing, but also going into, can the control be made from the TMC, and what is that, is it signal timing? Is it arterial TIM, involvement of law enforcement on the arterial, all those things. And so I'd say it's good input, because we're in the middle of developing that, and we're trying to, the crawl, walk, run concept, but certainly those things, they're more than just signal timing. This is what you're saying. I definitely agree. And anything you overlay the DSS, the AI-based DSS, and that's going to be, just tremendous to be able to take in all these inputs and be able to recommend, response plans. And that obviously in the final build out, that's going to be involving all the different modes and all the different partners, law enforcement, transit, and everything. So, but certainly it is more than just signal timing, and the public information piece is a huge challenge. I mean, the best thing we can do, I think, is to build this consortium where we're all in this together, and we're all not going to throw each other under the bus when that call happens and all those kinds of things, that we're all pushing in the same direction. And that's what we're trying to do. That's where, we've been just in the last kind of couple months, we're entering into that phase where we're going down to the traffic engineer's office and sitting with them as much as COVID will allow. But that's actually timely that it's kind of starting to loosen up a little bit in Tennessee. We can actually go in their facility and sit down with them and work with them directly. It's not just guys over here in a box developing the single time plan and then showing it to them. It's, okay, you guys, we're all working on this. And like you said before, also about the local streets, we're working through that. Typically you don't, state DOT doesn't typically send traffic down a local road unless they're going to be ready to pay for any damage, kind of thing. But we need to have that partnership from the local agencies to know the traffic's going there anyway during a diversion. So can we not manage that traffic with signal timing and other things? So you have great points, Steve.
Thank you, Lee. And to all of those who asked questions, we really appreciate this. I know we're not all in person, but I hope everybody can just, give a round of applause or thanks to Lee. It's great work. Tennessee DOT will be back for our session 3. It's not until a week from Thursday for our panel discussion and kind of sharing time. If you have other questions that come up that you want to send their way, go ahead and put them in the Q&A box. Julie and I will make sure they get saved and pulled into that session. With that, we are pretty close to needing to start our next presentation, so can't take a full break, but I'd say here, while we're administratively getting changed over to Mark Summerhauser, everybody just take a minute, stand up, stretch. It's always good to make sure that we get away from our seat and our desk for a little bit. We will take a longer break between presenter 2 and presenter 3. So Julie, why don't you go ahead and get our sharing over to Mark. Lee, thank you so much for all that insight. And
you're welcome.
I'd say, Mark, let's give it a minute here until people have had a chance to stand and stretch for a sec, and then you can go ahead and get started and share the Kansas City Scout perspective on integrated corridor management for I-35. All right, Mark, whenever you want to, you can unmute yourself and take it away. Oh, we're still not hearing you. Yeah, go ahead and check that mute.
I've got him unmuted now. Sorry about that, Mark.
Hey, no problem. I'm glad to be here this afternoon. My name is Mark Summerhauser. I'm the Scout ITS project manager here in the Kansas City region for the Kansas City Scout Traffic Management Center. Again, I was very interested in that first presentation, and you're definitely going to see a different flavor of integrated corridor management to what I will be presenting today. I always want to start out with a discussion of our region and what Kansas City Scout is and what it isn't. So that is the name of our traffic management center here in the Kansas City region. It is extremely unique because it is not a big legal organization. It is just the name of our three-way traffic management center that is jointly funded by both the Missouri and Kansas Departments of Transportation. Our Kansas City region is extremely unique in the fact that it's about 50-50 between the two states when you look at population, lane miles, traffic volumes, and it's been that way for a number of years. So this was always envisioned to be one regional traffic management center that's jointly funded by both DOTs that looks at traffic patterns in a regional municipal traffic pattern. So we are definitely seamless. We operate one traffic management center. Again, I'm listed as a MoDOT person because that's who has my benefits, but KDOT reimburses half of my salary, and we work seamlessly on both sides of the state line. If you know the actual geography in the Kansas City region, there's a road called State Line Road. That splits the two states. The Missouri River splits a little bit of the two states, but that state line road really doesn't care about what side of the state traffic's running and where the issues are. So we have always had very much since the late 90s and early 2000s, a regional focus. And we are then, again, we had some input from the statewide DOT traffic management sections, but really we're focused on the districts locally that MoDOT and KDOT both has. And then I'll be talking a lot about Mid-American Regional Council. That is the MPO in the region, and they have always been a very good unifying force. And one of the very unique things that I'll get into later on is the NPO, Mark, Mid-America Regional Council, actually takes the lead on the arterial management side. I am going to be talking about I-35 on the Kansas side. So this is really a KDOT project. And on the KDOT project, Kansas Department of Transportation does not do arterial traffic signals. So we have 30 municipalities that all have their own traffic signal department, and some of them are extremely small. So back when Scout was envisioned in the early 2000s, there was also an Operation Greenlight signal timing group led by the NPO that helps with cross-jurisdictional signal timing. We have one corridor that's 5 miles long that goes through 9 municipalities, and one municipality only owns one signal head. It doesn't even own all 4 signal heads. It just owns one signal head. And if you go back 20 years ago, when you were trying to do signal timing with such a small township municipality, that was really an impossible task. So as I get into it, you'll hear a lot about Mid-American Regional Council. And again, they are the leaders, the NPO on the arterial side. And then Scout is, again, MoDOT and KDOT focusing on the three-way management side. So I always want to start the table with that. Now, as we get into how my presentation is going to flow, it's kind of the timeline of the last 10 years of what KDOT has looked at the I-35 corridor. And I'm going to explain what kinds of, even before TSMO was a name, there was a very big focus back in 2010 on what are some of the cross-threading, operations-focused things you can do that aren't large capacity expansion projects. And I want to discuss again why we stopped for a minute and went through an integrated corridor management study after spending so many years including operational concepts in our studies. So with that, again, I will focus on where we are now and what lessons learned we've had and kind of where we came from. So this I-35 integrated corridor management study was concept of operations only. We tried within the region to get some of the federal funding for the large grants and studies and were honestly unsuccessful in it. But we saw the value in what the process of integrated corridor management was, and we wanted to take a step back from what we'd already tried and make sure that we were taking an integrated analysis of it. We had, whether you want to call it the TISMO toolbox, we had been implementing operations toolboxes to help us congestion on the I-35 corridor, but I will say we were missing some of the integration between them. And we identified that, and KDOT was able to find some funding. The Mid-American Regional Council, the MPO, took the lead in this study, but we slowed things down a little bit and took, again, an integrated approach to it because we wanted to make sure that some of the toolbox things that we were grabbing weren't disjointed, but were actually kind of a cohesive analysis. And even if we can't afford a big active traffic management deployment, a decision support tool, there's a lot of things you can learn from going through the integrated corridor management process that can help day-to-day operations. And you can really identify some of the gaps that you're missing when you're grabbing things out of the toolbox. So that's what we did back in 2017. We stopped for a minute, did this integrated corridor management plan only through concept of operations, but tried to figure out some of those gaps that we're missing. The I-35 corridor that I'm talking about here had been researched for over a decade. We're talking about 33 miles from the rural section. That's back in the bottom left. If you look in the top right of this picture of the map, that is actually crossing over to the Missouri side of the state line into downtown Kansas City, Missouri. There are 24 interchanges, 3 major system interchanges. There is the bidirectional travel where you see northbound is your morning peak and southbound tends to be your evening peak, but you do get some bleed over. It's not a pure AM and PM peak, so there are some nuances with some of the interchanges. And this really does affect both the urban, suburban, and rural. You do get long distance suburban commuters. You do get a lot of freight. There is a lot of intermodal and rail freight in this area. So again, this is the corridor that we're looking at. And the biggest thing that you've already heard is the integrated corridor management goal is maintaining a reliable travel time through the I-35 corridor. We're not going to fix all the congestion issues, but trying to get those oddball peaks that all of a sudden your 20-minute commute that's every day, 5 times a month becomes an hour and 20-minute commute and you miss your kid's soccer game. It's this whole shift to trying to get a reliable travel time that is unique. And that was actually causing some of the coordination issues we were talking about, because that is different than people who are looking at pure travel times, maybe level of service, doing VISM studies and corridor studies, and well, we can't do anything unless we get a level of service C or B. There's things that you can do that maybe get a significant improvement to travel time reliability that aren't necessarily going to fix all your level of service issues. So now I'm going to go back even further. So that was in 2017 when we were talking about the actual integrated corridor management study. If we go back to the early 2010s, we actually had a big regional thing, again, led by the Metropolitan Planning Organization, the MPO, that brought in the DOTs, transit, and looked at what can we do now to try to give more options to travelers and make reliability a bigger focus. And on the transit side, reliability is a big deal. And that led to, back in January of 2012, launching Bus on Shoulder. Again, I'm not going to go through these videos right now, but again, if we have time later, and if there are people who are very interested in Bus on Shoulder, there's a very good YouTube video that we can go through or you can watch later that really explains what Bus on Shoulder does and doesn't. There are a lot of restrictions that it can only run less than 30 miles an hour when it runs on the shoulder. This isn't something that runs at 60, 70 miles an hour. This is something to maintain reliability on the transit route when traffic's going 5 miles an hour, 10 miles an hour. So again, there's a lot of rules and stipulations. I'm not saying that's the only way to do Bus on Shoulder, but it is the more common way. You're maintaining a reliable, on-time travel route for those express transit routes when you get these significant congestion issues, whether it's routine congestion or due to an incident, they're allowed on the shoulder. But again, if this is something that you're interested in, we can talk about that at a later date. But this is one of the things that we could build on as we talk about years and years of focusing on operations and having this as a tool when we talk about some of that later integrated corridor management study that we did, again, 5 years after this, when this was launched in 2012. I will say this is not a huge number of riders. Again, this is a key service to key riders, and it does get reasonably full service, but this is not going to bleed off and take away congestion because you have 5,000 riders a commute in AM peak. So again, this is for a very limited targeted one, but again, it's just one of the tools in the toolbox that when we talk about a corridor approach, we can even do more enhancements maybe than what was done with this 2012 launch of Bus on Shoulder. So this was really one of the first things on that I-35 corridor that they really invested in. Make sure you have wide outside shoulders, have reliable transit, and it at least allows some options for those commuters going, especially in the AM peak to the north into downtown, and then the PM peak coming back in the evenings. So building off of that, there was a 5-county regional study in 2013 that had some recommendations that weren't all capacity. Again, this is a large KDOT study that talked about capacity issues throughout the 5-county region, had not only capacity recommendations, but started grabbing things again from the toolbox. What are some of the things that we can do operationally to try to help with some of these congestion issues without having to spend a $50 million capacity job that really only shifts a bottleneck a few miles or relieves a tiny bit of congestion. So funneling off of this 5-county study, they had an I-35 specific study that spun off of that in June of 2013, and they coined that I-35 moving forward. And that was specific in that Johnson-Wyandotte County area that I showed the earlier ICM map for. Really, the AM peak into downtown Kansas City towards the Missouri state line, and then the evening back to the south. And it not only, again, talked about capacity strategies, but system management strategies that you can grab out of the toolbox. Expand the use of ramp metering to the I-35 corridor. Back in 2008 and 2009, we had done our first pilot study on an I-435 corridor of 15 ramp meter locations. We did a second one on a problematic ramp that was just 2 ramps and 1 interchange that had a safety issue. This was really our 3rd deployment along this I-35 corridor. So it was really recommending We've learned a lot from those earlier late 2000 ramp meter deployments. We need to look about how that can fit in this I-35 corridor. It wanted to research the use of variable speed limits. Were there options back in 2013 for variable speed limits? And then it really wanted to talk about that bus on shoulder. How had it been operating? Were there any needs that the transit people were recommending or needing based on that? It did, of course, include targeted capacity strategies. There were identified key bottlenecks. Again, FHWA talks about bottleneck programs, and when you talk about having kind of an integrated corridor management approach, it was good to hear that Tennessee talked about those acceleration lanes. You don't want to just say, well, we're not building any concrete. You may need some targeted capacity concrete and asphalt solutions to help with acceleration lanes, bottlenecks, and that really should be an integrated part of your integrated corridor management. It's not one or the other. And then there was the talk about where are we going in the future with options of possible managed lanes or hard shoulder running. Is that something that is beyond the bus on shoulder? Is that something that's really feasible in this corridor? So again, it was nice to see this I-35 moving forward study come out. Again, I didn't really mention this before, but I've been working as a scout project manager for 20 years. I've seen this corridor and I've seen the congestion and some of the safety issues. And again, it was nice to see some of these studies recommending some low-cost things. And then also, what is the long-term plan? But when we looked at some of these results that came out of the recommendations, we were finding it was missing some things. There were some operational things, especially on the low-cost side, that weren't really covered in depth. And when we started hearing about integrated corridor management, we really wanted to get on board that and kind of take these documents and at least run this concept of operations to see what we were missing and what could we do, especially on the lower cost and more immediate side, since we don't have, again, a $50-60 million ICM project. What can we do, again, that's that low-hanging fruit? So in this time that we're getting ready to do the integrated corridor management project, the one thing that did come out was an immediate ramp metering project on I-35. It was something that came in that same time frame of around 2017. So that integrated corridor management study that I'll begin to next was actually getting wrapped up as we were launching the ramp meters in the spring of 2017. So again, these earlier studies were 2013. As we move into the spring of 2017, we're actually deploying some ramp meters on I-35 in this corridor. The bus on shoulder has already been in place since 2012, and we're wrapping up the integrated corridor management concept of operations. So that's where we're at as we're getting to the beginning of 2017. So the I-35 ramp meters, we actually looked at a lot of the interchanges on the key congestion points. We have very good detector data. We have travel time index, playing time index. We have reliability numbers. And we could see the need, even not just with the data from the detectors, but from the video data, from watching cameras, when you see driver behavior with some of these merging movements, it doesn't take too much to say that is not something that's very safe or conducive to a high level of safety, and we should be looking to do something about it. This was again done spring of 2017. It was going to be an adaptive ramp metering algorithm, just like the pilot project from the late 2000s. It was going to be based at the beginning on mainline speeds. So it was adaptive, and it was only when the speeds dropped would it be activated. So it was not just a dumb time of day system. It had a time of day backup, but again, it was based on the vehicle speeds. We did find that we had limited deployment that we were recommending based on the geometrics. And that's where some of the lessons learned I'll get to later. When you don't have the ability to combine a capacity funding project with some acceleration lanes with some of the operations focused, like say a ramp metering retrofit, where you just make it fit to an existing ramp geometry, you can really be hamstrung. So we ended up in the end of this only being able to install on 6 ramps because the other ones were having too short of acceleration lanes. Maybe the storage from the intersection to the ramp metering stop bar was too short, that the signal was so efficient that it would always trigger the Q loop and flush, and we would never be able to operate it because the storage for vehicles was too short. It still had some safety benefits because we had video that showed the dangerous weaving, braking, and merging that we were seeing at some of these locations, but it really limited us from doing a 12 ramp meter corridor approach to doing spot safety improvements. So again, that's something that we are still fighting to this day about when can we invest, find some money for acceleration lane improvements, storage improvements, so we can expand ramp metering for a more corridor approach, due to the fact that, again, we had limited funding, but we wanted to do something now back in 2017. So again, this was very localized. We have a I-35 ramp metering video. Again, I'm saving all the videos to the end if someone wants to see it. We had extensive, if there's a lot of interest in ramp metering, back from 2008 with our pilot project and back to what we did on I-35, we've done so many public involvement campaigns and informational campaigns that it really is, we've learned a lot from it. I would say that from being an engineer, you want to cover all the bases and explain all the nuances of all the ramp metering algorithms. Are you allowing 1 vehicle per green, 2 vehicle per greens? How is 1 lane ramp metering different than 2 lane ramp meters? And it's honestly almost too much. A lot of the public, when you talk about introducing ramp metering, they just need to see what the problem is. And if you show a release of 20 to 30 vehicles in 1 signal cycle, because some of these double left turn signals and things like that are so efficient, if there's a standard acceleration lane and you're at capacity, your lanes are full at their occupancy and capacity, and 30 vehicles come down a ramp bumper to bumper, you just turn on the video camera and get a video clip and you see some crazy driver behavior. And this ramp mirroring video, again, if you want to see it later, we've got that. And we just wanted to explain what the problem is and a couple of the highlights, and not explain all 50 of the nuances of the ramp metering, because really they just need to identify that there's a safety issue, and breaking up those platoons into more manageable merging is less stressful and safer for people. So again, if we want to look at that video, again, we can pull that out. But that's what we were able to do with ramp metering on the corridor back in 2017, and what we were not, because we didn't have funding, again, for the capital improvement sides for, again, capacity, storage capacity, or acceleration lanes. So that, again, takes us back to 2017, again, early 2017. And that, again, brings us now to the actual integrated corridor management project. So we got a little funding. Honestly, this was $105,000 for a consultant to help us look at what toolbox things we've already done and what are the integrated corridor management things that we could maybe do better. And honestly, I used to cringe at the capability and maturity model assessments a little bit, but after going through so many of these, and especially an integrated corridor management one, I will state it is extremely beneficial. And again, it's not supposed to be 100% accurate. And when you get a large number of stakeholders in a room, it doesn't have to be precise. Not everybody has to agree. But what it does is it brings a lot of discussion. about especially what things are really siloed and very low functioning and what things may be highly functioning, and learn from the successes, the things that you are maybe multimodal integrated, optimized, partially integrated. How did you get to the point where some of those things were operating at such a high level? So we did take time with stakeholders and go through the full capability maturity model. And again, we were able to get a lot of good discussion and really start to identify what were some of the gaps. We again pulled bus on shoulder, we pulled ramp metering, we've been doing three-way management. We had Operation Greenlight, which I'll get into more detail. We had the capability to do cross-jurisdictional signal timing. There's a lot of good things going on, but there were definitely things that could take some work and needed some work. So again, starting off with the capability maturity model was a great way to start. And that led to when we really started looking at the corridor, we stopped for a minute with a consultant and talked about, let's kind of take it down to a personal level. We have good census information, occupancy, OD information, where people are traveling to and from. So we actually made a list of like 12 fake people and said, we have the capability to look at what they do on a day-to-day basis and what is their travel commute really like. What transit options do they have? What cycling options do they have? What are the time of day that people are going? And what does it mean if they are wanting to go from where they live to where they work, maybe to a doctor's appointment? And we actually made some fake trips. Again, this is right here on the map. I mean, you can see in this edition, what are the things that someone was taking a travel time. And again, this is not doing anything fancy other than, again, Google Maps and some of the stuff's out there. But what are the routes? And if there is an incident, where is it showing that they have an option to travel around? And what we did is we took several of those and ran through fake trips. If you ever look at our final report, this person in the bottom left, we nicknamed her Sarah, just a name by fake. And this was the one that we focused on. But we really wanted to see is, what is it really like if someone wanted to take one of those express bus routes? Is it realistic to triple the number of buses doing that and people will really do that? Or is it so limited in its options that whatever it's providing bus on shoulder right now is probably all it's going to do? What are the options that someone has to detour on a signal route? This I-35 corridor, if you've noticed, is kind of the diagonal route. It's not a straight north-south route. So there isn't like one parallel highway where you can do a lot of specific detouring. There may be 4 or 5 different grid routes that are available. And we really wanted to talk about back in 2017, what were things like Waze doing and Google Traffic? Are we going to really invest in a lot of arterial message boards where we know private industry and some of the travel routing apps actually kind of diversify traffic on their own, and people are more liable to follow that than really a trailblazed route? So again, there was a lot of discussion about, again, these typical people and what their actual commute options are. How long is that congestion period? Is it really just for an hour and 20 minutes, 45 minutes? And what are the options as we look at some of the other things in integrated corridor management, like demand management? Is there anything we can do to get them out of those peak period times? We looked at some of the freight issues that the intermodal hubs were having and some of the technology that they were using, talking to them as stakeholders. But again, the big thing is we were looking at what is the reliability. Again, not that we can, again, shift all the congestion, but if we can shift some of it, can we get the reliability numbers in a much more improved state than they were. So one of the big things is Mid-American Regional Council, the MPO, does, and they have for years, done rideshare. They have a lot of apps and things that are available to commuters that you can find carpool partners, cycling partners, walking partners, transit partners, and you can map out those routes. So we cross-referenced those optional routes with, again, what was available for any commuter in that area. And then we start looking at Operation Greenlight. Again, that is, again, led by the MPO. They do the cross-jurisdictional signal timing. If you look at this, you see some of the major routes and how I-35 is kind of the diagonal route into downtown Kansas City on the Missouri side. So there are options, but they were going to be tough. If we were trying to route people for a major incident, it's not just get on this north-south route, ride it for 10 miles. You might have to jog and do some lefts and rights. And when you talk about trying to signal time and optimize some detour corridors that aren't in a straight linear motion, that may require multiple lefts or rights, that can get very tricky. So we didn't want to give up on it, but it wasn't going to be a major focus of what we were going to do. We wanted to make sure, again, that we had great communication with the Operation Greenlight signal timing people, that they had good funding at not only their level, but each of the municipalities' level. But it wasn't going to be the catch-all. We needed multiple integrated corridor management solutions if we were really going to bleed off traffic during major incidents. So again, just another tool in the toolbox and a great partner to have, but again, only has a limited amount of stuff that they can actively do. So when we actually look at the report, again, this is just concept of operations. We identified these 5 areas as some of the biggest ones. We wanted to create a TSMO committee within the NPO to make sure that the toolbox items that we were picking were the right one and that they were integrated between each other. For instance, if we were going to do another ramp metering project, take our lessons learned and don't do it until you have funding for the acceleration lane improvements, the storage improvements. Maybe wait a year or two until you have funding to do something more comprehensive instead of the spot safety improvements. Or if you can't wait for the spot safety improvements, make sure that there's a secondary fully funded project that will do the other ones in the pipeline. Some discussions like that, again, within a TSMO committee. The intensification of traffic incident management is huge. We have a scout by state incident management coordinator. And that, of all the things we've done since 2017, has actually been one of the biggest improvements in the fact that we actually have a traffic incident management committee where we don't have a TSMO committee yet. We actually ended up shifting it and said the very highest priority was a traffic incident management committee. So that, since 2017, has been one of the biggest focuses, is to make sure not only were we funding it with staffing, but getting the cross-jurisdictional attendance from that NPO committee. So that has had a lot of improvement in the last couple of years. The mobility hubs along the I-35 corridor have kind of spawned off from that bus on shoulder. We've seen some improvements. I will say we still don't have like a huge increase. So since 2012, we barely have a little increase in the number of buses doing it. We don't have a 5 times increase in the number of buses doing it. So right now, the bus on shoulder is still working, but it still has a pretty limited ridership. Operation Greenlight has seen enhancements. They had a recent software enhancement to do a lot of really after action reviews, and some of the things that they've done. They can do a lot of benefit cost reporting, some software improvements, but a lot of reporting and analysis improvements that allow them to do good after action reviews and see when we have had, say, a tanker truck jackknife on I-35 during the morning rush, how did they handle it? Where did traffic go? What were some of the turning movements that they were able to really help? And how many different routes did it really bleed off on when you talked about the diversion routing? So there has been some improvement. That was done at an STP funding level. That was put as competition against other regional STP projects, and that actually was picked off the top. So you see some of the MPOs and the people in the region agreeing to that and identifying that that is important. And I know we had a question earlier about some of the municipalities maybe not spending as much. That does happen, and you will see some of the lower, I guess, less funded municipalities. They get more of the federal money and the STP money to help do some of this maintenance, and you don't get much complaints from the better funded municipalities. They understand what would happen if you had a break in the corridor communication and how critical it is to have a cohesive signal timing system and why that's needed in really a corridor approach. So you might hear a couple grumblings, but you definitely, it's done and scored extremely well in multiple cycles of STP and, again, federal funding that went towards traffic operations. So I did want to kind of point that out. The bottom one, the rideshare KC, the encouraged telecommuting, delayed community flex time. I'm going to get into that a little bit now, even though I kind of have lessons learned later on. I mentioned that the MPO Mark has a very good app for some of that stuff. But when you talk about really expanding that to traffic demand management, we found a huge gap there. And honestly, since this came as a recommendation back in 2017, we've been struggling it. You don't want to send myself as a engineer, an traffic operations engineer, to try to talk to your 10 biggest employers and do a big presentation on graphs and things and how their life and commuting times and quality of commuting would be improved if they would allow flex time or shift schedules. Some of the people at the MPO level have been doing this for 20 years with carpooling, ride share, and we're having a hard time figuring out how you fund that and what person does that need to be to really make an impact in travel demand management and reaching out to those big employers. We've done a lot of, I guess, just like you're doing, reaching out to other integrated corridor management groups, some of the biggest ones, and almost to a T, every single one of them talks about how reaching out to employers and getting major commuter shifting and flex time and working at home time is hard to do. And you need to fund someone who, if you're going to make that a priority, it takes a dedicated person to do it. And then on top of that, throw in what COVID has done. So this I-35 corridor, I heard Tennessee said that their numbers are back up. We still aren't seeing a ton of congestion yet. It's getting closer. I would say the evening peak is getting more congested than the morning peak. It appears that the morning people are spreading out their time. We're not going out at the same time, but a lot of people are leaving at the same time in the evening. We've learned more with this COVID traffic shift, and maybe we've educated the public more about how you can eliminate some bottlenecks and congestion than probably 10 years of public outreach. I don't know if we're going to lose that in the next 2 years and it's going to completely go away and no one's going to remember it, or if maybe there's more concern from big employers about their, again, quality of life of their employees, and will they allow more telecommuting? Will they allow to shift schedules to get away from those peak periods? But again, this is a kind of the early lessons learned. We've learned a lot about the power of demand management due to COVID, and we're still, again, struggling a little about how we're going to try to use that momentum and maybe make it more long lasting, so you don't have to spend $40 million on a construction project if maybe some of the employers or things can do things more long term to, again, keep those numbers down. But again, that's one that we're actively talking about, and we're very interested to see what the next, again, 12 to 18 months are going to show. And maybe can we do something to help support or spread the word about how good traffic demand management can be as a low cost improvement to congestion, and tying that to the quality of life of people's employees. Priority 2, this was really back in 2017 a big question mark, in all honesty, about where we were going to be from 2017 to maybe 2022 with autonomous vehicles and the shift. I will say that since 2017, we haven't seen a whole lot out of what autonomous vehicles are going to do to reduce congestion. I know we've had some discussions about if you turn on your vehicle's safety systems, and I'm not talking about autonomous, I'm just talking about the integrated ones that maybe will do automated braking. They actually are so conservative that they lead to huge gaps between vehicles. If you turn on your braking assist, it won't let you get within 100 feet of the car in front of you. So it's actually gapping things out and making things, again, I don't know how many people during congested rush hour periods are going to be doing that, but we aren't seeing large amounts of capacity improvements due to autonomous vehicles. And I don't think it's going to be something that's going to be coming very quickly to this corridor. So this priority 2 kind of midterm items, we haven't done a whole lot with. We've looked a little bit about some of the connected vehicles and vehicle to infrastructure system, but we are not looking for any investment on that right now. We're really looking at just what vehicles have in themselves. And if anything, we are doing things that use apps like Waze. For instance, we have a AVL system that will automatically post a notification to Waze that you're approaching a person with a flat tire on the shoulder. So more safety things like that we've been promoting and focusing on what partnerships we can do to make sure some of the tools we have are improving safety, but really not on the capacity side. That's really the only thing we've done from, again, connected vehicles are some of these safety notifications and making sure that we're connected fully with Waze. And again, our AVL system is also. Priority number 3 had 2 items. One, to expand the use of DMS on arterials. And I would say since 2017, that's gone down even more. I think we've identified that with Waze and some of the third-party apps and trailblazing and multiple paths, there might be a couple of key locations that get DMSs on arterials, but there probably won't be a big investment in it. Again, part of that is because we don't have a good straight north-south parallel route. There's so many different ones, but it's also what are the third-party driving apps doing, and can they do a better job than what a DMS could do anyway? And in all honesty, are drivers more liable to follow that than what you post on a message board or a Trailblazer sign? The implementing of dynamic lanes, managed lanes on I-35, that has been a little bit long-term problematic in the fact that the geography on this section of I-35 heading to downtown is so tough. We have an active freight line, railroad line, right to the west. There's a major creek tributary just to the east, and we've already installed maybe 8 miles of large retaining walls. So even if you wanted to build it, there's not a lot of room to add the concrete that you would need for a managed lane. Instead, KDOT has shifted their focus to really looking at the US 69 corridor further south, which has a little more open terrain to do it. So again, it's still a long-term priority that they're going to look at, especially after this US 69 corridor gets done. But it's not going to be anything that's one of the highest priorities. So again, that falls down to, again, to a long-term priority level 3. So kind of focusing back on this corridor, again, we were looking for reliable travel time along that I-35 corridor. We don't have a big funding package to do a full integrated corridor management thing, but we do invest in the Scout Freeway Traffic Management Center every year. We invest in the Operation Greenlight Corridor. We've already done 6 ramp meters. We have elevated incident management to a MPO-led committee that is looking at not only, again, things I mentioned, like the Waze alerts from AVL when there's people out there, looking at what are some of the major detour routes and high incident locations. We've gone back and looked at some of the bottleneck freeway, I guess things that would take a capacity at construction, concrete and asphalt project, and we've looked at those. So first, I mentioned targeted capacity and bottleneck improvements that impact corridor operations. Those shouldn't be exclusive. Capacity and operations should be funded together if you want to get the most benefit. What do the reliability performance measures really say? And that's looking at where, so we have segments where you can look at where is the reliability really, really bad. Is the reliability bad in this 2-mile segment specifically and not this whole 20-mile segment? And is there an operational improvement or a bottleneck improvement that can be done right there that's focused? I will mention the ramp metering. We did want to keep improving it. So we've shifted from a speed-based algorithm to an occupancy-based algorithm. So as the lanes start filling up before speeds drop, we will activate the ramp metering then, because we know the lanes are filling up and that the speeds are about to drop. So what can you do that's proactive versus reactive? We were able to get some operations funding to make sure we implemented that algorithm. And then I mentioned before that the travel demand management, especially what we learned at COVID, is there any way that we can do something with those major employers to make that more long-term? Again, this isn't comprehensive to everything, but those are some of the biggest ones. So again, I appreciate the time. Again, this was, again, a low cost kind of analysis we did to kind of reset where we've come from. Again, with that, I'll open it up to questions if there's any time left.
Thank you so much, Mark. A lot of great information there. We are running a little tight on time, but we have time for about 1 question. Others we will save for day 3 in our panel discussions. But if anybody has a question they'd like to ask of Mark right now, we can certainly take it. You can enter it into the Q&A panel or raise your hand. Okay, it looks like we do have a hand raised from Neil Spiller. Neil, you are unmuted.
Thank you. Mark, thank you. Very detailed. I want to preface this by saying I do not want in any way this to be taken as some kind of criticism, but I am obligated to tell you that again, I think what you guys have done is great. I think it's great for the corridor, but in all seriousness, I think what you've described is a integrated facility management and less so of an integrated corridor management. And I'm only speaking from my definition. I understand that different DOTs have different definitions. One of the handouts that I gave out as a prerequisite to this workshop was something called a travel shed, which invokes every available resource and every available arterial and local road, left and right, up and down in a corridor, usually a wedge, that supports the mainline facility, so that when something happens on the mainline facility, then all of those other roads are put into play to expand, if you will, or absorb the traffic, because because there's something horrific that's happened up on the mainline. The mainline has a truck turnover, or they have a bridge hit, or they have something that's put it out of order for a long period of time and is effectively a standstill. So where are those cars going to go? The FHWA definition and identity of a integrated corridor management is the entire region and the entire corridor absorbing something that happens when there is a hugely impacting event on that main line. So, you know, we also endorse, obviously, there's programs that endorse ATDM stuff like the ramp metering, like the variable speed limits, you know, the incident management. Everything that occurs up on that facility, however, is effectively facility centric. In the FHWA definition of a travel shed or as a ICM region, again, we're talking about something that it's, to me, is much greater. It's also the involvement of all of the stakeholder agencies and stakeholder cities and towns along or in that region that have come to bear and agree that the traffic's going to have to divert through their town for some short period to get around whatever horrific event has happened up in the main line. So again, as politely as I can, I want to express what I think you guys are doing is terrific in terms of the Scout and the improvements that you've made along I-35 corridor. But I'm not so sure that I would agree that it's a corridor solution as it's a facility solution. We might, you know, have a difference of opinion in what that definition is, and we might certainly would invite a discussion offline about that. But I'll just leave by saying I hope that everybody has an opportunity to look at the kind of the prerequisite material that we sent prior to this and defines FHWA's definition of what we consider to be an integrated corridor response, integrated ICM management, integration of a corridor managed throughout that entire corridor and not necessarily on that facility. So I'll leave it at that. Thank you for your presentation and thank you, Julie.
Thanks, Neil.
No problem. I would
That's
say one thing that I did. I would hope that the travel demand management aspect, especially with what's learned with COVID, could really be looked at in more detail. I know fully about the wanting a decision support system to have that, and we have some ad hoc, honestly, decision support things and procedures in place. But whatever can be done to really help that travel demand management side, especially with, again, employers and things, I would just hope that that could really be expounded on. So I fully agree. Again, what we have done here, again, was just concept of operations and tying a few things together. But again, with the research we've done, whatever we can get from Federal Highway and really pushing travel demand management and shifting, I'd really like to see some of that in the near future. So I fully understand your comments and I can't argue with them. I did want to just mention that.
Thank you so much, Mark. And we really appreciate your presentation today. We're going to go ahead and take a break. Since we weren't able to take one earlier, we're going to take a 10-minute break. We will return at 3:15 for our Arizona DOT presentation. So if everybody needs a minute to refill a beverage or go to the restroom, etc., we will reconvene at 3:15. And if anybody has questions for Mark on his presentation that they'd like to be included on our session 3, feel free to enter them into the Q&A panel, and we will save those and make sure that they are ready for session 3. So thanks everybody, and we'll talk to you again in about 10 minutes.
All right, and with that, we are back from our break. This is again John Mark, HDR, and I'm excited to introduce our last speaker for today from the Arizona Department of Transportation. It's going to be 2 members of ADOT. So Derek and Mark, if you don't mind just introducing yourselves and getting started with your presentation now, the floor is yours.
Hello, yeah, good afternoon. Thank you. This is, I'm sorry, go ahead, Derek.
Well, they unmuted me, so I guess I'll talk. I'll be very brief. Mark's going to give the presentation. A quick background on me is I served many, many years in law enforcement as a state trooper and also as a retired chief of police. So Mark and I both have law enforcement experience. Mark has many 25, 30 years as a supervisor with the Chandler Police Department in the dispatch center. And so our presentation is going to really surround the operational component. It's been discussed before we broke that, what is the ICM? I think you'll be able to see what Arizona's is. And I feel that we're breaking that point of getting the relationships involved in the various disciplines, including the municipalities and all the different stages and people that touch the main line. So Mark, have at it.
Yeah, thank you, Derek. My name is Mark DeLute, and as Derek said, my background is public safety communications. I was a supervisor for almost 30 years and been with ADOT for 5. And I was very fortunate to be given the opportunity to be the dispatch manager for the Traffic Operations Center, which really was part of a transformation of the TOC, and I'll talk about that a little bit later on. And very coincidentally, my skill set and Derek's background in law enforcement dovetailed quite nicely with some of the really crucial parts of ICM as it relates to what we saw in the previous presentations. I just want to say a couple of quick notes on that. Both very detail-oriented and I thought very informative and great. I enjoyed them both. But this presentation, as Derek mentioned, is really going to focus on just one aspect of that, which is the operational responsibilities. And that is really, it's a small aspect as far as when you look at the overall. I mean, you're talking, very in-depth planning, the administration, the technical oversight, and the technical integration, with all these partners. But ultimately, how it's been applied here in Arizona, it really does start the operational perspective as far as, when ICM must be initiated, what are the qualifications, and, what type of situational analysis goes on when applying ICM principles. And in the case of Arizona, it's at this time applied only for the Loop 101 within the Phoenix metro area, which is one of several highways that we have in the Phoenix metro area. If we could go to the next slide, please. So the history of ICM in Arizona. So ADOT and Maricopa County Department of Transportation, they partnered to secure funding through a joint leadership through the FHWA and their Advanced Transportation Congestion Management and Technology Demonstration in 2017 to implement ICM systems on the entire 61-mile Loop 101 corridor in the Phoenix metro area. Now, I should definitely mention that as far as this latest push in this initiative for ICM here in Arizona, our primary mover on this has been Kimley Horn, the planning and design engineering consult firm. They have had the really, from my perspective in operations, a daunting task in getting all the partners just to meet and just to really get into all the different aspects of ICM and to ensure, number one, to make people feel welcome, that their voices were heard, and to apply this into an overarching program where not only is everyone's voice heard, but the necessary participation that is necessary to make this successful. So prior to this, ICM, as far as what we were doing here in the Phoenix metro area, it really was more of an informal agreement between ourselves, ADOT, and the county, where we agreed on a combined mutual response plan. So it was more like, for those in public safety, you probably heard the term mutual aid. That's really what it was kind of like, related to high impact incidents, but it was only on a few selected areas on the Loop 101. So as an example, what that would be is that where the county would have response jurisdiction regarding incident management, they would let us know when they were working an incident that could possibly be impactful to a highway or ramps. And conversely, when ADOT was working an event and we recognized, well, this could be impactful to the county, both entities had a mobile field response, and there would be a combined response. Again, for those that are familiar with public safety and mutual aid, mutual response, that's what it was there. The specifics of that, which we'll get into, were not yet really quite in place yet. So next slide, please. So the goal of the Loop 101 mobility plan is to leverage state, county, municipal, and private investments to facilitate improved real-time freeway arterial coordination when incidents impact Loop 101 and divert traffic onto local streets. I think both previous presenters said, hey, the real impact is really, sure, we can manage events on the highway, whatever they might be, but the real impact, from ADOT perspective, is like, well, we can shut down the highway, but ultimately that traffic has to go somewhere, and that's where Kimley Horn was so instrumental in trying to ensure that there was this participation, that this is buy-in from the various, the other government entities, where they were, municipal, and we've got some other outliers. They're saying, look, this really is something that you need to be involved in. So the ICM program will increase agency awareness of incidents, develop an enhanced decision support system capabilities for advanced TISMO, strategy implementation, and promote across-agency information sharing, and provide an advanced warning and alerts to travelers on the corridor to promote trip decision-making and awareness. And that's that last bit right there. I think it's very easy, as we view our own responsibilities, that we kind of become enamored with our own direct responsibilities and responses. And for myself, with the background in police, and what I've seen here definitely with ADOT is that, operationally we tend to focus on, unit response, incident management, documentation, notification. But, and again, Kimley Horn is instrumental in this. When you start looking at, what is it that we can do on the broad spectrum to make sure that, our primary, customers, the traveling public, to keep them involved and aware. And thankfully here at ADOT, we've got a very involved communications department. We have public information officers that are stationed here in the Traffic Operations Center so that we can maximize that outreach, because when you do encounter a significant event, time is of the essence. and we'll speak about that a little bit later on. It's very easy to quote unquote jump the gun when we receive information or when there's verification of what appears to be a full closure. But getting that, getting that engagement, both internal to organization and external, are what I've seen have been, are extremely critical in a successful implementation of ICM. All right, the next slide, please. So the operational responsibilities. So within ICM, ADOT's operational responsibilities follow two primary entities. We have obviously, the statewide traffic operations center, which is my group, and then the incident response unit, which is Derek's under Derek's responsibility, which is the mobile response unit. And this is a new entity within our organization that was established in late 2019. And the purpose behind that, which I can just give you a little briefly, is that ADOT did not have a quote-unquote on-the-road mobile response entity. The support for hazard mitigation and infrastructure maintenance as it related to ADOT was in support of law enforcement, and that involved we would have to notify a maintenance unit or a maintenance group, and they in turn would have to step away from their ongoing responsibilities of asset management, maintenance, to respond to a request for traffic control, to respond to remove some debris. So research was done, and it was the justification was there where we could have a mobile unit which would then be there on the road from 0530 until 2030, Monday through Friday, during the high activity times. And this allowed tremendous flexibility, I should say tremendously advanced flexibility regarding ICM. Now we did not have to solely rely on communication from law enforcement, but there are often times where our own units would be instrumental in the situational analysis and determining if the event really was worthy of ICM. So for our purposes, ICM activation occurs upon recognition or a verified report of a full closure, all lanes blocked on the Loop 101. And the reason why I kind of added that in there is that a full closure from law enforcement could mean, well, like for example, our Highway Patrol, they consider a full closure is if 50% of the lanes are blocked. That's not what we at ADOT consider a full closure. So there was an agreement that we would, ICM would be inherent truly on all lanes blocked. So due to the day-to-day close work and relationship with the Arizona Department of Public Safety, DPS, which has troopers stationed in the operations center here, they're connected to DPS CAD, and the staff here in the TOC is the first ADOT personnel to receive, process, and verify this report utilizing the CCTV system based on the 911 calls received by DPS. Having spoken with some other TOC staff members in not just in Arizona but municipalities in other states, is that we are very fortunate in that with time being of the essence, is that we have that direct communication with DPS. That let's say it's very difficult to beat the 911 calls that the PSAP, that the Public Safety Answering Point, receives as far as timeliness. For the metro area, especially on the 101, we're able to verify very quickly whether we have a situation that is as accurately reported, not only location but detail-wise. So the process as such is that once we've got that report, we can verify. And what we really kind of learned is that the initial reports, as received even by the PSAP, they could be constantly developing, right? There could be the story within the story, as those of us may with law enforcement. We find out that just because there's a report of a vehicle off-right and a couple lanes blocked, was this related to a criminal investigation that another agency is working that they just haven't told us about? So that's why we place a huge emphasis on you know, constant situational analysis and evaluation until we have a truly verified report on scene as to what really is occurring that we're faced with. All right, next slide, please. So here's a little more of the initiation of ICM. So the verified full closure process. And the approach that we've taken and encouraged by Kimberly Horn is that it's always good to err on the side of caution when you receive a verified report, even if you got something on camera, that if it appears that, you know, it's very easy to get into this mindset of like, well, that's not too bad. That's just like, you know, one overturned truck. Well, we don't know what is in relation to. Was this, again, like I mentioned earlier, was it in relation to some kind of criminal event? When the units get on scene, is there going to be something, you know, serious that, you know, would then say, well, this in itself is related to, you know, maybe there was an ejection that you don't see on camera, which results in a fatality. So that's why we are on the side of caution. The worst thing is that you can do is once you begin notification process and they decide to scale back, that's easy. With timing of the essence, if you decide to hold back and it turns into something, you've lost critical time, not only notifying your internal and external partners, but also to the traveling public. So again, A.TOC working with DPS, we get that report. More likely when DPS verifies that with us in here, because we're using the same camera system, they share that with their dispatch. We then, you know, begin the notification process, which is we notify the county, which is REACT, which is their response. We also then, if they're on the road, we dispatch the incident response unit. If it's after hours, they're then notified, page out for response. Again, a very critical aspect is the local public information officers, by here they're stationed with us in the TOC, they're informed and they make their notifications. And our PIO section, communications, has done a great job with lots of social media engagement. We get lots of reports and lots of back and forth from there, very critical. And then we also make a point to notify local police, the local entities. So that in itself is kind of an interesting part of our operations here, something that we encountered. We, being 24/7, it's very easy to assume, well, we're 24/7, so other TMCs must be as well. Well, that's not the case. And unfortunately, for on-call TMCs, their on-call would be sometimes nothing more than, you know, one person with a cell phone. So because time is of the essence upon the initial absorption of the event, you know, we want to make that one call, get it to a verified, reputable source that will then ensure the proper dissemination within their own organization. So we found at the end of the day, the one group that will answer the phone 24/7, that's your police department. So part of our process is, and as the operations, you know, the concept of operations continues to be developed here, we make the call to the police department. Even though we may have that one on call, they would be very much more aware of, you know, organizationally and within the hierarchy of who to call, what's affected. Not to mention that from a police perspective, you know, they want to be made aware of something that's going to be impactful, especially on their local roadways. So the local TMCs, as far as you see that line there from REACT, and then the local PIO, you know, ideally we want to be able just to make that one phone call with the context that we have and then be done with it, because once the event is actually once it's verified and there's been ICM has been initiated, you know, everyone's going to be plenty busy. So the last thing we want to do is making, you know, repeat phone calls, you know, making sure that if there is some kind of a contact, you know, list and stuff, that we just have to make that one phone call. And we found out that calling the PD is the best way to go. All right, next slide, please. So the operational responsibilities here in the TOC for a post-ICM activation, as I mentioned, the timeliness of the initial notification to all stakeholders is really the critical task for the TOC. You know, as to be expected, any significant event, ICM or not, comes along with a host of responsibilities. We've got the internal resources dispatching the units, activating the overhead signs, notifying the PIOs, ensuring the administrative notifications. So that's why we've really emphasized that the ICM notification process has to be fluid, transparent, and free of task duplication. So that kind of goes back to what I mentioned earlier about notifying the police departments when there is activation. The last thing we want to do is like having to play phone tag or sit there and just having to go down a complete list of individuals. We want to try and get that one call in and then be done with it. So the Traffic Operations Center here, we utilize a CAD system to track and document all aspects of the response, including the details and updates of the event as it runs its course. And of course, we highlight the benchmarks of the TIM timeline. We place a very strong emphasis on this with the dispatchers. So this allows for a, hopefully a thorough debrief and analysis of the event as we get more of these events, and to not just for us, but we can share with our stakeholders as to, these are the timelines that are the benchmarks, the thresholds that were met. How did this fit in with the notifications to our partners? Was this passed on? Was this received? And it just allows for, I think, a better overall product down the line. All right, next slide, please. So the incident response, their operational responsibilities, ICM management. So the RU, again, is ADOT's Field Operations Mobile Response Entity. And the RU will work with a law enforcement entity that has jurisdiction or disposition of the event, and with any other affected governmental entities regarding the management of the event, the closure specifics, alternate routes, and to minimize the collateral effects of the highway impediment. So from an operational perspective, what we've learned is that if you have an involved event and you've got multiple jurisdictions, having a coherent ICS is really critical, not only for the field communique, but also what is being transmitted back to the TOC or the TMCs to make sure that we're all on the same page. And that can be a bit of a challenge, simply because whether we like it or not, law enforcement works with law enforcement very well. And there is sometimes a bit of a hesitation to get that, to really emphasize that, this needs to be successful, this needs to be worked together. And again, reaching back to where Kimberly Horn, they have done a good job of reaching out to law enforcement, the entities, to make sure that there is involvement, that we've got consistency, and that we've got continuity, and that at the end of the day, it helps us all. It helps us all. There are obviously challenges that come into play when we've got, for example, the law enforcement agency that might have disposition of the event. They make a decision that perhaps the collateral partner is not pleased with. They want to keep the highway closed longer. They want to, which means, continued redirecting of traffic in their area. And as the ops center, it's very difficult, very easy to get caught in the middle. So if we have, DPS or whoever it is, law enforcement calls us and tells us what's going on, then we get a call from one of the collateral partners and the guy, why is this going on? So not only is the education of ICM important, but incident command, very, very important, and everybody needs to be on board. Next slide, please. So this has been interesting in the discussions that we had with some of the partners. It seems like there is almost the conclusion of the ICM event gets more people's attention than the initiation. And I think that might be part of a history of these events, where in that one of our partners will say, well, gosh, this we only found out by happenstance that the highway had been reopened. So once the event has been signed, a proper clearance and disposition, a repeat of the initial notification process, should be initiated, and allowing for the release of resources and dissemination of news updates to the traveling public. That's something, it seems somewhat innocuous, but very important. We place such an emphasis on the initiation of the event, which is absolutely important, because that that activates all the various partners and their responsibilities. But just as important, people have an absolute right to know okay, this event has concluded, we can now need to transition back to, normal operations. So the supervisory verification of data collecting, the documented thresholds that we talked about for us in our CAD system, and a debrief allowing for the instilling of legacy knowledge and fine-tuning of individual processes. For us, very important because, again, this whole ICM concept new in as far as the broader application. Very important for the staff here in the TOC because as dispatchers, we've only been quote-unquote dispatching for about a year and a half, which is also how long the RU has been an entity as far as a mobile response unit. So unlike police departments, unlike fire departments, which have decades and decades of legacy knowledge and experience that's passed on, this is all very new. So again, this is something that for those with experience, we seek to ingrain that as part of the organization's culture to instill that legacy knowledge ultimately for passing on and fine-tuning. And if I had to guess, I would not be surprised to see ICM expand beyond just the Loop 101 here in the Phoenix metro area as we see its implementation. All right, next screen, please. So there's some challenges in dealing with non-24/7 partners, and I think, as I mentioned, as the TOC here is a 24/7 operation, and many municipal TMCs are only during business hours, after hours on call, and this can result in extensive delays and have to make repeated calls. I mentioned this earlier. So for after-hours ICM activations in particular, as I mentioned, we found ourselves gravitating towards the local PD, which placed the burden on them. And I know police departments, by virtue of their critical responsibilities, it's sometimes not greeted happily, but it does fall under the greater sphere of public or governmental response to public safety concerns and public concerns in general. So the TMC's ability to access their resource in a timely manner are inherent limitations of non-24/7 staffing. Some of the TMCs that we deal with, they've got a little more robust after-hours methodology. Others, they are extremely limited, and that involves, for example, a response back perhaps to the center or having to notify others, whatever their process is. Timeliness, again, for us here, we're kind of spoiled because we're 24/7. Others, more of a challenge. Next slide, please. So the challenges in dealing with partners with fewer resources. For the Loop 101 ICM Mobility Project, we've got a wide variety of cities and communities who are connected to Loop 101. So the established cities who do have, as I got noted there, they've got good infrastructure and are well equipped to handle a significant event or reroute through the jurisdictions, while others are less capable. Even though here in operations we don't make the field calls, it's just good to know what our partners have and what they are able to absorb, and to pass this on, not especially first here to our public information officers, but it contributes to great situational awareness, right? It contributes to event awareness, so that if you do, for example, once you do establish some legacy knowledge in your ops center, you can pass this on to your field resources just when the initial notification is made, if it's someone that is newer, or someone that might be as far as the command structure instead of the other one. For example, on the east side of the Loop 101, we've got an Indian community, and they are very much more limited than some of the other municipal partners as far as some of their roads to take a significant amount of traffic off the highway. They really don't. So this helps the field and helps us plan and the PIO plan as far as making, what's the final determination for what are we advising the motorists. We just don't want to give some agency that is incapable of handling this and have them suffer the consequences. We want to try and be part of this overall management, this overall approach and perspective toward, engagement and complete awareness, whatever we can. All right, the next slide, please. So this map kind of shows you all 61 miles of the Loop 101 as it goes through the metro area. You see that we've got some, what I would call high impact areas, and we've got the Cactus League spring training stadiums. We've also got certain infrastructure locations where we've got high profile events, the Gila River Arena State Farm Stadium, and along there are numerous shopping malls. And all this, when you're talking about an ICM event that happens already at one of these areas during either a high profile event or where there just is a history of high traffic volumes, these are all go part and parcel of creating a plan, operations, working with field operations to come up with the best possible plan to mitigate the incident. All right, next slide, please. Here's just a quick shot of our Traffic Operations Center. You see, the picture there is kind of tough to see because they like to keep it a little bit dark here. Obviously, the video wall, we've got 5 full-time workstations from which we work the various responsibilities for both the metro and the rural areas. And the 2 consoles that you see on the ends that are close to the video wall, those are the workstations that are dedicated to our Department of Public Safety troopers. A big part of what we do, obviously, in here, that instant communication is invaluable in addressing unplanned events on the highways here in the metro area and statewide, actually, too. All right, next slide, please. Okay, to mention the ADOT incident response unit, the RU, 14 mobile units on the road from 0530 to 2030, Monday through Friday, overlapping, and it's been a great addition to ADOT's resources, just for the fact that the great support that we can give law enforcement, having these guys out there in these trucks providing support, not only to motorists that find themselves in difficult situations, but to the many DPS traffic units out there, a lot of them on motors. Just having them out there, providing law enforcement support, creating a safe situation, getting motorists off the highway, removing impediments, a great leap forward in timeliness for asset management and response to damage. The RU has been a very good success. Lots of positive feedback internally and definitely from citizens. It's been a success story for ADOT. All right, next slide, please. So again, the operational aspect, as I mentioned, is critical, but it's just one of many factors, including but not limited to wide-ranging and impactful admin and technical aspects and applications, and to ensure success and adaptability regardless of the situation or stakeholders involved. Again, operations, one small part of planning, admin, and technical, but it is where it starts. It has to start somewhere. And for those that have eyes on it, working directly with public safety, it's been our experience thus far that it's the best place to start. So I should have said it earlier, if anybody had any questions as I was giving the talk. I know sometimes when you hear something that piques your interest, I should have encouraged a question, but if there are any questions, please feel free.
Thank you so much, Mark. And just a reminder to our participants, once again, if you have questions, you can type them into the Q&A panel, or you can raise your hand, and we will unmute you to ask your questions verbally. And to raise your hand if you're on the online meeting, simply look for the hand icon, which I believe is on your screen in between the participant and panelist list and the Q&A panel. Or if you're call-in only, you can raise your hand by dialing *3. It looks like we do have a question entered into our Q&A. Leslie Hart says, or is asking, Mark, if you wouldn't mind to discuss the Regional Communications Network, RCN. Among other shared resources, it allows viewing of other agencies' CCTVs, which is useful to confirm that a detour route is not already disrupted by construction incidents, etc.
Yeah, so there is a a public gateway to our CCTV. You know, it's view only, static, and obviously, you know, they can't move or anything like that. But we do have within 511 or the citizen portal, we do enter the event there. We've got an interface with our CAD system with our 511. So any changes to the event, you know, that we do there automatically translates or transfers to 511. And like with many, I think 511 citizen portals, the ability is there for people to customize their notification thresholds based on their route. And so we try and again engaged and with our communication staff, with them being they actually are the owners of our 511, so they rely on that extensively to make their notifications. So between that and, you know, the information directly from CAD as the event runs its course and the updates, not just the notations, but the updates of the actual event itself as it changes status, we transfer through there as soon as possible.
Thank you. We have another question that says, what is the training for the mobile response unit members?
That's something I will. I can only provide an educated guess as such, unless if Derek's on, he wants to comment. But I know he was having some audio challenge. There's some classroom training, and then it's extensive on-the-job training as far as, you know, the all parts of you know, mobile response, which includes not only the specifics regarding, you know, field operations procedures, but it also involves an aspect of training related to CAD operations. They do have MDCs in their units. There's also a very critical program that tracks assets and times that is unique to our organization. Extensive training with that as well, but it's in conjunction, a big part of their time management. But if you would like some details as far as, like, you know, a specific, like almost like what kind of quote unquote academy do they kind of go through before they go solo on the road, we can, if you want to reach out to Derek or myself, we can, I'm sure, get you whatever it is that their training guide or their operations manual and get that to you.
Thank you. We did have a note just a comment from Neil Spiller. He wanted to point out that the National Center of Excellence is hosting an FHWA webinar coming up on an ICM event from trigger through event to resolution on July 12th. You can register at the National Center of Excellence or contact Neil for more info, but that just for anybody that might be interested in more on this particular topic. We still have some time for questions if anybody wants to add a question to the Q&A panel or wants to raise their hand.
All right. It seems like we may have reached the end of our questions for today. Just want to thank Mark and then also Derek for agreeing to be some of our speakers. We really appreciate the presentation, and I want to also thank Mark Sommerhauser because we broke pretty quick and didn't get a full thank you there. really appreciate all of our speakers, and we're so thankful that, today we were able to get their perspectives and shared, but then that we will also have, our June 10th meeting on day 3 of this same exchange, where we'll be able to, ask them some more directed questions and get some feedback from the audience. This is going to bring us to a close today. I wanted to thank everybody for hanging in there. We'll have a similar session of 3 speakers on Thursday. So looking forward to being able to share that with you. And then, like I said, really interested in seeing this group come back next Thursday as well, June 10th in the afternoon, and have a panel discussion, and then also some breakout sessions so that we can get some feedback from all of the folks that have been listening in and taking down, their notes on kind of key lessons learned. And we'll give everybody a chance to share in those kind of small group settings what your lessons learned have been, and make sure that all gets documented through this. If anybody has any final questions, not specific to speakers, but of the host, feel free to put those in the chat pod before you leave, and we can take care of them. But otherwise, I would say that for our featured content, we are adjourned today, and I appreciate all of your guys' time.